Hey everyone, and welcome back. Hope you're doing well. Today, we're talking about The X-Files, one of the most iconic sci-fi shows of all time. There was one episode that became incredibly controversial when it aired. It was so graphic and disturbing that, after its premiere on Fox, the network refused to air it in reruns for years. It also became the first episode of The X-Files to receive a TVMA rating. This is the second episode of Season 4, and it's called Home. So I thought it'd be fun to do a deep dive on the episode, share my thoughts on it, and see how it holds up today. So in the cold open of the episode, we see this dark and stormy night, and we zoom into this creepy house. And inside the house, there's someone giving birth. She basically pumps out this baby, and then the people in her house take the baby, and then they bury it outside. Yeah, I told you this was gonna be fucked up. The classic X-Files title sequence rolls on the screen. This, by the way, used to scare the shit out of me when I was younger, especially like the theme song. The theme song terrified me. I couldn't listen to it ever. It would make me shit my pants every time. Next, we see a group of kids playing baseball in the rural town of Home, Pennsylvania, which makes sense because if you live in rural Pennsylvania, there's probably nothing else to do. Also, I'm pretty sure Trent Reznor grew up in a town like this, which explains a lot. Anyway, so one of the kids hits the ball into the yard of that creepy house we saw in the cold open, and immediately you can tell all the kids are like, man, fuck that shit. One of the kids says something really important here, actually.
It went on the Peacock's property!
That house belongs to the infamous Peacock family, and everybody in the town seems to know that they're a bunch of weirdos. And I actually like this detail in the episode because it feels like this creepy version of Sandlot. The kids start to play baseball again with a different ball, and as the batter starts to dig his foot into the ground, we start to see blood surface from the soil. And that's when it's revealed to us that he's standing on top of the dead baby fetus thing from the beginning. All the kids are immediately like, yo, what the fuck is that? And rightfully so. Like, look, you can even see the hand sticking out and everything. It's disgusting. This is what ultimately prompts Mulder and Scully to do an investigation. Which, for those of you who don't know, Mulder and Scully are two FBI agents, and their whole job is to investigate these unsolved cases that are either paranormal or extraterrestrial in nature. And they have this core dynamic throughout the show where Mulder is super tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist, basically a Reddit user, and Scully is very much like, this can be explained with facts and logic. So they come to this small town and they start looking at the crime scene, and then the sheriff comes, and because the town is so small, they have only one sheriff. And he starts talking about how he loves this little town he lives in. Everybody knows everybody, nothing bad ever happens here, but that's all about to change because of this one crime. Then Mulder sees that house that we looked at earlier with these creepy people, and he sees them staring at him, and he asks the sheriff about them. And he says, oh yeah, that's the Peacock family. It's 3 boys, and their parents died in a car accident. He basically explains that they live this really primitive way of life where they have no electricity, no running water, they grow their own food, and they are very isolated from the rest of society. And he also hints at the fact that they're inbred.
Raise and breed their own stock.
So with that said and done, Mulder and Scully go to do the autopsy on the baby corpse. But because this town is so small, it doesn't have an actual moratorium, so they just keep the baby corpse in the fridge like a Thanksgiving turkey, which is kind of fucked. And so they do the autopsy in this really small room, and Scully's immediately like, this baby has every birth defect possible. And she also figures out that the baby inhaled soil through its nose, meaning that it was alive and breathing when it got buried. So she starts to suspect that there's something larger going on here. And Mulder's basically like, it's just a dead baby, quit worrying so much. This is actually really interesting though, because as I said before, Mulder's usually the one who gets super invested in the case they're trying to solve. And he starts to say things like, oh, it's part of this bigger cover-up, this bigger conspiracy. And Scully tries to be the voice of reason. This is one of the rare instances where the roles are actually flipped, and I really like that about this episode. Scully starts to suggest that maybe the Peacocks are involved with this somehow. You know, there's a bunch of inbred guys there. This is a baby with a bunch of birth defects. Maybe it's their kid. But Mulder basically says, they're too fucking ugly to get laid. The more I think about it, he really is the OG Reddit user. But Scully theorizes that maybe the Peacocks have some woman that they kidnapped and they're forcing her to have their babies against their will. And since kidnappings are something that the FBI does investigate, it's enough to convince Mulder to continue investigating the case. So they go inside the Peacock house to look for evidence, and wouldn't you know it, they find a bloody footstep that matches the footstep at the crime scene. So they have everything they need to put out a warrant for their arrest. But little do we know, the Peacocks are actually hiding under the floorboards, listening to everything that's going on. So the night before they're about to make the arrests, the sheriff sits out on his porch, and he has this No Country for Old Men moment where he's like, I don't recognize my town no more, everything's about to change. And then he goes to bed. But because the Peacocks got wind of what was going on, they pull up to his house in this old beat up car they have, which I think is really funny that they have a car, because it's explicitly explained they have no electricity or running water, but just in case we gotta go kill the sheriff, we got this old car. Oh, and it's also worth mentioning that this is the first time we get a good look at the Peacocks, and good lord, they put the Habsburgs to shame. So the sheriff figures out that the Peacocks are there to kill him, and so he tries to fight them off, but he's just no match for their inbred strength, and they end up killing him and the wife. The next morning, Mulder and Scully go to the house where the sheriff and his wife are murdered, and we see the deputy sitting on the front steps all sad because, the sheriff's dead. And Mulder's like, okay, we're gonna have to call for backup to take out these weirdos. But the deputy's like, we don't need backup. It's 3 against 3, we can take out these bastards ourselves. So they go to the Peacock's house again, and after scoping out the house for a little bit, the deputy decides, I'm gonna go in, and he storms the front door of the house, and turns out the house is Home Alone booby-trapped. And I actually didn't like this part because they were actually setting up a really interesting arc in this episode where the sheriff's dead and the deputy's obviously distraught about it because he saw the sheriff as kind of a mentor figure, and so it creates this potential full circle moment where the deputy avenges the sheriff, but they kind of forgo that to have this really edgy moment, but it's whatever. Since the house is rigged with booby traps and it's now 3 against 2, Mulder and Scully hatch this plan to release the pigs on the farm to lure the Peacocks out of the house. So once they do this, they sneak into the house and avoid the booby traps, and they get into this one room. And when they get in, they see all these pictures on the wall that show the Peacock lineage. And it's shown to us how the Peacocks are essentially a result of generations of inbreeding. They then find a woman hiding under the bed. And, oh, Jesus. They find a woman hiding under the bed, and it turns out to be the Peacock's mother. And it turns out she's there on her own volition, and she's been bearing the Peacock's son's children. So she's been having her own son's children, which is beyond fucked. Since she's there on her own volition, they can't really, save her. And so they're like, okay, well, we're just still gonna arrest your sons because they killed 3 people. So when the sons realize what's going on, they get back inside the house. Mulder and Scully get into a scuffle with the 3 of them and end up killing 2. But amidst all the chaos, one escapes with the mom. And Scully's like, we gotta go after them. And Mulder's like, yeah, they're gone. You could just tell Mulder doesn't give a shit about this case in this episode. In the last scene, we see the mom and the one remaining son driving away, looking for a new town to settle it, have a new beginning, and continue their abhorrent tradition. And that's how it ends. That's the entire plot of the episode. So after watching this episode all the way through, I think it's still pretty shocking, even by today's standards. The subject matter was a lot darker and more graphic than some of the shit that I see on TV today. Now, like I said, this episode was super controversial when it came out, but many fans of the show today consider Home to be one of the best episodes in the series. And it even has one of the highest IMDb scores of the entire show, with an 8.8 out of 10. And I agree. A lot of the X-Files episodes play around this whole idea of it could be the supernatural, but then again it might not. Who knows, the truth is out there. But this one doesn't do that. It's just like, wouldn't it be fucked up if this happened? Wouldn't it be fucked up if you lived in Kentucky? It feels more like a Twilight Zone episode in that regard. And you can definitely see the kind of impact this episode had on media. I would hazard to guess that the guy who made Barbarian was a fan of this episode. Just a hunch. But anyway, let me know what you think. Did this episode go too far? Is it just edgy for the sake of being edgy? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.